Cultivate your faith with the pure Word of God. Hello, friends. Peace and grace be multiplied unto you. Welcome to Cultivate Your Faith, a presentation of the pure Word of God. Here we grow by expecting and depending on the sure promises of God to fulfill in a personal way. Here's your host, Dr. Throy Campbell.
Hello, my friends. Thank you for joining us today. We have another exciting episode of Your Faith Story on the Cultivate Your Faith podcast. We have a very special guest, Dr. Vivia Haye. Dr. Haye, how are you? You live in one of my favorite states in this country, Florida. How is it going in Florida?
Hello, Dr. Campbell. It is going really well in the state of Florida today. We are a little overcast, but it is an awesome day. You know, sunny South Florida. I'm sure you'd like to trade places with me, right?
Yeah, I would. I tell you, we're having a blast today in North Texas. It's good weather, but last week we literally lived in an igloo. But today is just great. I love Florida. It's close to Jamaica. If you go into Walmart, you can get Excelsior crackers. If you go down the road, you can get patty and cocoa bread to buy. I love Florida. It's so good to have you on the show. And I know you've had a special journey from being a young lady back in Jamaica and now being here today as a successful graduate with your doctorate in nursing, being a professor at a university. I must say, I have your bio sketch here, and I should go to my notes. But it's so good to have you on the show. And let me go to the notes and tell a little bit about you. Dr. Vivia Haye was born on the island of Jamaica. She is the fifth child of 12 children. Dr. Haye currently resides in Plantation, Florida, with her daughter, Brianna Scott. She is an ordained elder of the Seventh Day Adventist Church and currently is a member of the Mt Pisgah Seventh Day Adventist Church in Miami Gardens, Florida. Dr. Haye has been active in several health fairs, women's ministries, revivals, and prayer efforts. And having said all of that, Dr. Haye works full-time as an assistant professor at Nova Southeastern University in the Assaf College of Nursing. And some of her goals are to reach the lost for Christ through prayer and discipleship, and to mentor and impart knowledge to new students, providing them with the tools necessary to become a safe and competent nurse. Dr. Haye attributes her spiritual walk to prayer, humility, and a personal relationship with her heavenly Father. I enjoyed reading that, and there's so much to learn of your path, Dr. Haye. And, you know, one thing that pops out to me on your bio sketch is the fact that you were the fifth child of 12. That was a big house, a big yard, a lot of siblings. And perhaps that's where we could start talking about your journey, your faith experience, if you don't mind.
Oh, yes. Yeah, not at all. I am so happy to share that. I indeed I'm the fifth child of 12 children. I have 10 brothers and one sister. And it's kind of interesting because my parents, they wanted a girl initially when they started having children. And unfortunately, they had 4 boys before having me. So you can imagine I was very special. I was like the smack there, almost right in the middle. And my parents really, really were very protective of me. And so they sheltered me a lot in my early years. They were so happy for me, and they decided they wanted to go back for a second girl, but that one took quite much a longer time. So that girl came at number 11. So I feel so special. To the point where my brothers had a nickname for me. They called me Sister. And so growing up among boys was really an interesting experience. You know, I was very sheltered. I had to stay inside most of the time. Couldn't go out and run and climb the trees like I wanted to. But I think all those experiences kind of molded me somewhat in my earlier years and, you know, kind of brought me to where I am today.
Right. That's nice. I should say, just for the audience, I can't remember whether we mentioned this, that you're from Westmoreland, Jamaica. So I imagine you in the green, lush area of Westmoreland and being a sister of 10 odd brothers. And as you've said, how protective they have been of you. And perhaps they are still today, but life came along, right? So let's go on and see how things change and perhaps how even those early days sort of shaped how you go forward. Dr. Haye.
Yes, as a child, I remember my brothers combing my hair because I had no sisters, as you can see. So my eldest brother used to comb my hair. He used to walk me to infant school to make sure that I got to school. They would really care for me. And I remember leaving infant school and heading on to primary school for further education. But something happened during my final year or so of primary school. We were playing. We used to play a lot. So you can imagine my parents were very, very industrious. My father was a welder. He also worked in the aluminum bauxite companies in Jamaica. And he was a welder and a mechanic. And so in the early 70s, he got laid off and he came home and he started doing more mechanic work. They also had multiple businesses. My mom and dad, they were farmers also. So they planted a lot of ground provisions to help out, I guess, the children, as well as they were involved in cane planting and reaping and had different vehicles. They used to transport sugarcane to the factory. My father had tractors and trailers, and he would work on different vehicles. So he was always, working. My mom, on the other hand, she was more the businesswoman type. So she helped him along with his business. They also had a minivan that they used to transport people. So they were very, very industrious as a couple. And my father, somehow in my early years, built a shop for my mom. It came to a time because of so many children, they could not really travel up and down with the minivan and stuff. So they would go ahead and have someone drive the van while my mom would now stay home with the children. And so my father built a shop. The shop is in Jamaica where they sell little things like rice and flour and crackers and all those good stuff. And so the children would be in the shop and, they would bake and sell, baked goods as well. And so I remember one particular instance where the shop was closed after a certain time in the afternoon and we would be just playing around as kids. And one night, I don't know if you remember in Jamaica, we have these things called hot plate. I'm not sure which. Yes.
It's a
and
coil.
So it's a coil with like 2 burners. And they used to make tea at night. So this particular night, they were making some cerasee. And we were running and playing around the shop. And somehow, my brothers, I was running with them like in a circle in the shop. And lo and behold, my foot tripped over the hot plate and over came the pot of cerasee. Wow. And unfortunately, it got the entire back of my body and I got severely burned. That was like maybe my fifth grade year in primary school, getting ready to, graduate from primary school to head on to high school. And so I was severely burned. And that really put a damper on my schooling. So I had to be out of school for about 2 months. And it was really, really challenging because I was so sad. I missed all my friends. I got better maybe in about 8 to 12 weeks and got back to school, had to do my common entrance, didn't do well because I'd missed so much studies. And so I remember my father was so encouraging. He was such an encourager. He would say, don't worry, try again. You will do well the next time. And the following year, which was now 1979, thereabout, he encouraged me again and he said, go back, you're going to do well this time. What do you want to do when you grow up? And I said, I want to be a doctor. And he says, you can do it. You can do anything you put your mind to. And so in 1979, I resat my common entrance exam, it was called at that time. And I passed my common entrance exam, but unfortunately, something happened. And my dad was not able to see that. He unfortunately died. So I had an experience with death at such a young age. I was around maybe 10
You were about 12, 13 or somewhere there, right?
No.
Yeah, I'm just trying
to... Younger. I was about 10 and a half years old when he died.
Yeah, because you've just taken your common entrance. That's correct.
Right. So, and that in itself was an experience for me. My parents, even though they had so many of us, they were somewhat very religious. We were of the Jehovah's Witness faith. And I think all those things kind of played into my journey as I journeyed through life because it prepared me for who I am today. So as a little girl at the age of 9 and 10, I was out there witnessing to people in the district. And I think all of that prepared me for my later years and kind of matured me into the person I am today. And So let me say here, because you're saying a lot, and I'm enjoying it because I have a rich Jamaican heritage, and I love to sit and listen to the Cersei tea. I've had so many good and not so good experiences with my mom requiring me to drink Cersei tea. I guess all Jamaicans can that resonate with, But you mentioned. Vivia, how your dad encouraged you to go back and retake the common entrance exam, and your dad encouraged you that, look, you can do this. This is a little girl in elementary school, and her dad is there encouraging her along the way, and that says a lot. And I can just imagine that with your dad's sudden passing at that age. Unfortunately, without learning of you being successful at the common entrance, that's really rough. And you also mentioned how, as a Jehovah's Witness, and I admire this about Jehovah's Witness, they are truly witnesses. They go around and they tell the story of what they believe. So I can see so much coming up. I can see how your faith is being cultivated, how your life circumstances are molding you. And that's a strong background right there. Let's go forward. Tell me more. Tell me more. Yeah, before I go forward, I think something that was very an integral part of my growing up had to do with my father's death, the circumstances behind his death. I wanted to share with you that I was a part of the process, even at that tender age. I remembered my dad used to require every night before we go to bed, we had to read the Bible. We had to read a psalm or something before we go to bed. And the night he passed away, he had called on me to read the Bible, but I was so tired, and my mom says, no, not tonight. And about maybe 1:32 in the morning, I was awakened by my mother, and she was like, your father is not feeling well. And she said, get up, you have to be with me to help him. And I remember as a little girl, being up in those early hours of the morning, and he wasn't feeling well. He was having stomach discomfort, indigestion. We made him tea. We tried to comfort him, but he did not respond well. And I remember my mom saying to my dad, and I think this is kind of where my faith really got cemented, because I remembered her saying to him, you need to pray. And she called him by his name. His name was Leslie Washington, but she called him Washi. She was like, come on, you need to pray. As a young girl that age, I remember it so vividly. And she said to him, say after me. And she said, Lord, if it is thy will, let it be. I remembered standing before the bed and listening to this with the cup of tea in my hand that we had made for him to drink. And the next moment, my mom just let out a scream. It was a scream that has resonated with me throughout the years, something that has not left me. And I was about, say, 10 and a half years old. And the next thing I looked, I saw his head went down. I didn't know what was happening, didn't understand that really this was death. And I remembered her saying to me, he's gone. And, we laid him out on the bed. That was my earliest experience with death. And I believed that experience has really molded me, because it gave me the strength and the fortitude that the Lord knew that I needed for those tough years ahead that I was going to experience, right, which I didn't know would come up. And so it kind of prepared me, and being that we were from such a big family, I remember during the funeral, my uncle came and he said to me, I am going to help you guys. I am going to take you and your brother, and I'm going to take you both to the United States. And I was so excited. And that kind of plummeted me to a different level, where I kind of transitioned from primary school, heading to high school, having that goal in the back of my head that, hey, I'm going to America one day, right? So that was kind of one of the early experiences of, how the Lord really intervened, and how he kind of worked things in such a way.
Right. You have painted such a beautiful picture, in the midst of your dad's passing, which was sudden, and words can't fully describe what you experienced, but the Spirit of God was there to strengthen you. And thank God your uncle, stepped in and helped and promised a path forward. And that's kind of cheered you up. And thank you for telling us all these details and how God, put things together. That's just wonderful. And good memories too, right?
Yes, I sometimes I think about it and I'm like, wow, you really have a good memory to recall all of this. So we transitioned. You do have a good memory. Transitioning from my father's death, it was really traumatic, I believe, as a child. But back then we didn't have therapists, like how you have today, who would come in and really, give you the therapy you need. So we all grieved in different ways, but I believe just experiencing his death, that kind of experience gave me closure, and it also propelled me forward to what I had ahead. Yeah. So, this brought me now forward to passing my common entrance, and the next transition in my life was transitioning from country life to city life. Because I don't know if you recall, in Jamaica, we're given two choices when you go to choose for which schools you want to choose. And I chose for a school in the city and a school in my area. Mm-hmm. However, they gave me my first choice, which was Montego Bay High. So imagine leaving now from the country, leaving your family, all your siblings behind, and having now to transition into a new environment, meeting new people, living with new people. It was family I went to live with, but even so, it was a different transition.
Right.
So high school was interesting. It was exciting. It was different. I mean, growing up, going to a co-ed school, and then all of a sudden finding yourself in a school with all girls. That was a change for me. All girls school. Yeah.
Right.
So transitioned there for 5 years. It was very challenging because, like I said, it was 12 of us. My mom couldn't really find the tuition to pay for the fees for the school. And so my uncle, and this was another faith experience where my uncle kind of stood up. He helped to pay for the fees. He helped to pay for room and board so that I was able to finish high school, because his promise was that he would help one of his brother's children. And so I was the one that was, taken into account to be helped.
What a blessing.
So what a blessing, an amazing blessing. I went through 5 years of high school, finished that, and transitioned to the Americas. And my last year of high school was another kind of faith experience, because I had to transition from family to family again, family to boarding with a boarder, which was not family, and then transition into family again. So it was a lot of ups and downs and turns in my life, but the Lord really guided me to the right people to kind of keep me on the path. Because sometimes I look back and at my life and I say, based on the journey that I went through, God really had a hand in how he guided me, and the different people that had a part to play in my life to where I am today, so had a lot of changes.
It's so clearly a lot of things were happening, You were at an all-girls school, and you said you lived with family. Then you went and lived on campus, was it? With a roommate, another girl? And then is that what happened? And but what I'm trying to get at, though, is what faith challenges you had at that time, and as you mentioned earlier, your dad taught you to have devotionals and to be a prayer person. So how did that play out being at Montego Bay High?
So when I went to Montego Bay High, I was still a Jehovah's Witness. It so happened that the aunt that I lived with, in the area she lived, there was a couple who was a Jehovah's Witness. And so I was placed into their care to take me to and from church. And within my fourth year of high school, so that kind of still kind of engaged me in the word and, kind of staying anchored in the word. In fourth form, going into fifth form, my aunt and her family decided to migrate to the United States.
Okay.
And the challenge was, what do they do with me? Because I couldn't go with them. I was in the process of receiving my filing as well through my uncle, but it had not come through because they had to adopt me to get me here.
Takes time.
And so, yes. So there was a lady that lived in the area that was a renter for students. She boarded students, and she was well known in the little area that I lived. And so my aunt knew her. So she made arrangements for me to go and live with her in lieu of finally ending up with another aunt who lived a little bit more closer into the town. And so living with her, I can attest that's where my faith was really tested, because even though you lived with family, they're a little more flexible. But when you go to live with someone who you don't know, this is where I'm learning now how to be independent, how to follow rules. You cannot be out at a certain time. You have to abide by the rules that are here. There are certain things you have to do. And so I found myself having to pray harder and depend on God even more because of the challenges I faced with this new lady. She was extremely strict. I mean, if you left your room, the bed had to be made. The shoes had to be on the shelf. It couldn't be under the bed. She would come in and check the sheets. So I constantly had to be on top of my game. My room had to be clean. And one of the things that she would say to me is, I want to make sure that when you become an adult, you know how to keep your house. And she always would say this, I'd love to come to your home when you become an adult to see, what you have learned from being here with me. What a blessing. And these are some of the things that have really, mentored me and molded me and stayed with me throughout the years. Yeah.
There's so many things that could have happened to a young lady whose dad has passed and moved to the city, going to high school. So many things could have happened, but God placed family and good friends, and that lady you said was strict. I thank God for strict mothers and strict grandmothers. And so, Vivia, I can see how things have molded you in Jamaica. And I imagine you could talk for the rest of the afternoon about your Jamaican experience. And actually, that's what I would want to listen to. But now your paperwork came through, and your uncle adopted you, and you moved to the United States. I imagine you went to college soon thereafter. Is it okay to make that jump now to the U.S.?
Yes, we can. I wish that were true, though. I came to the United States, and what was so integral about that is I did my final common entrance the last day. I don't know if you remember back then, the immigration gave you a certain time to leave the island. So I was up to my last day on the island. And so I had my last GC exam on that day, and I had to go straight to the airport. That was back in 1985, June. And I found myself at Miami International Airport heading to the United States of America. Or I should say the Sangsters International Airport heading to Miami International.
Sangster,
and I got here.
Yes.
Yes.
I follow you. Right.
Got here into Miami, and now was transitioning into a new country and a new place. Yeah. Lived in somewhere up in Boca Raton. I'm not sure if you've heard about that area in Florida, but it's a little more for the elderly rich folks, so to speak.
Okay.
So I found myself in an environment where there was a lot of elderly people, no young people around, an uncle and an aunt who was, in their middle age. And so they brought me here. I was very grateful, but I was lonely. And after about a month of being with them, they decided that this is not the place for me. It is too quiet, too slow. I needed to be somewhere where there was more life, where I could find a job and start getting more independent. And so after a month of transition into the United States, they placed me in the care of another couple in Miami, in the city of Miami.
Yeah.
Now, I believe my faith was challenged here. What a transition.
Right.
And my faith was challenged here because I not only was placed with a couple, but it was a young couple. I was placed with them to live with them for a month. And with the understanding that within that month, I would locate and find a job. And I would start working and now pay for my own rent. So they paid 1 month's rent And they said, okay, we're giving you 30 days. You need to go out. You need to find a job. You need to start working and paying your own bills. Can you imagine a 17-year-old?
How old were you at that time?
17 and a half. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine coming to a new country, not knowing anyone, and after 1 month being placed in this position? It was something else.
That's difficult. That words cannot describe that.
Extremely difficult. But I believe my faith again played a big role here, because I was very determined. In the back of my mind, all I could think about was, I want to be a doctor. This is what I want to be. This is my goal. And I'm going to go to university. And I was very focused. However, with those challenges, it kind of hampered me, because now I had to go out. I had to learn the area. I was walking up and down in Miami Gardens every day trying to find a job. No one would hire me. They looked at me. They're like, you're a little girl. You don't have any experience. We can't hire you without experience. And this is back in the 80s, right? And, I have no clue what you're talking about. I've never worked in my life. So, this was very, very challenging for me. But then again, my faith, I believed, gave me the courage to continue, and I did not lose hope. I think about it all the time, and I said I could have gotten into so much trouble. I could have ended up in, with the wrong company. But somehow, as I said, I believed all these people who had a part to play in my life, especially in my last year of high school, that strict monitoring and ensuring that I knew what to do, how to keep a house, how to cook, how to wash, how to take care of myself. All those things kind of prepared me for this experience that I was about to encounter.
Yeah.
And so
living in the city of Miami.
Miami, yes.
Right. Living in the city of Miami, a completely different culture, everything is just different. There's nowhere in Jamaica at that time to compare to not Montego Bay compared to Miami is like just
night
opposite.
and day,
and for night and day, right? And for a young lady, 17, not 18 yet, trying to hustle, trying to make life, but yet you stayed focused. This is unheard of. I can tell you,
yes,
this is unheard of, and there are so many things to distract and to lead you down the wrong path. Wow. What a story.
I stayed focused. What a story. But you know what happened after 1 month of being in Miami? I was at another roadblock. Couldn't find a job. Had no money to pay the second month's rent. Reached out to my uncle, and his response was, hey, I took care of you in high school. I paid your tuition. I paid your room and board. I filed for you. I adopted you. I brought you here. Unfortunately, this is as far as I can go. I can't do any more for you. You're going to have to figure this out on your own. Right?
Oh, my.
And so that was like the shocker of my life. Now, I told you, before that in my last year of high school, I lived with this lady who was a boarder, and then I had to transition to other family. And it just shows you how God was in all of this, because the family that I transitioned to was another aunt with her children who were also in high school. And it so happened when I got to Miami after the month and I could not find anywhere to go, it was one of those cousins, the eldest one, who had, he was working on the ship, and he had finally come off the ship and was now living in Fort Lauderdale with his wife. And we were still keeping in touch as cousins. And so I connected with him, reached out to him. And so that's how I ended up leaving from Miami to Fort Lauderdale. So it just goes to show you that the path that I was traveling on, God had a way. I didn't understand back then what God was doing when he moved me from Westmoreland to Montego Bay, when he moved me to my aunt's house, when he connected me with these people. And when my aunt left, how he moved me with someone else. And then when I was able to transition to this other aunt, and here I am reaping the benefits, years after, from family again. And so that's how I ended up in Fort Lauderdale.
All right. So I think it's a good time to take a break. What a journey, Dr. Vivia Haye.
What a journey.
Young lady, young child, really, with 10 brothers and another sister, of course, and living in Westmoreland. Dad passed in your very presence. He passed away after a prayer. What an experience, and then you transitioned to high school in Montego Bay. Your uncle filed for you when you moved to Florida. Were left on your own in Miami for a little bit of time. But God always placed people in your path to help you along the way. I wonder how many immigrants can relate to your story, Very interesting, and I appreciate the details. We're going to take a quick break here and come back and pick up where you're now in Fort Lauderdale. And I know we're going somewhere because I read your bio at the beginning of the show, and where you are today. I can't imagine. Thanks for sharing. We'll be back in a moment.
Thanks for listening to Cultivate Your Faith. We cultivate our faith by feeding on the Word of God. By sharing, we receive. By receiving, we grow. Will you share as you have received? Join us next week as we continue our journey. Go to CultivateurFaith.com to sign up to our email list, subscribe for new episodes, and find the resources mentioned in the show notes.